Hi, my name is Alicia, and today I'm going to talk to you about the cognitive dissonance theory. So, does anyone know what selective exposure is? And if you don't know what selective exposure is, by definition, selective exposure is when an individual favors information which reinforces their pre-existing views while avoiding contradictory information. And that source came from oxfordjournals.com. The purpose of my study is to show how cognitive dissonance ties into when people read online health messages. My best source was my article, which is titled To Your Health, Self-Regulation of Health Behavior Through Selective Exposure to Online Health Messages. Okay, so this morning first we will discuss cognitive dissonance and how it was introduced in the study. And then next I will explain the theory and how it was used in the study. And then we'll discuss some of the methods that were used in the study. Okay, so let's get started. Cognitive dissonance is the feeling of discomfort resulting from inconsistent attitudes, thoughts, and behaviors. Okay, cognitive dissonance is used to explain how people make choices when reading healthcare messages. So when reading a healthcare message and it says something as far as you should maybe exercise more, they believe that if you are a person who is already physically active, that you are more likely to read that health message online as uh, as to working out. And if you're a person who tends to be a little bit less active, you are more likely to defer away from that healthcare message. So individuals prefer their already existing behaviors and views, and then messages that challenge a person's behavior are also avoided. Selective exposure in health communication. Okay, so reading interests remain the same even when the reading challenged a regular behavior. So, as I stated in the previous example, sometimes when people would read healthcare messages, if they were a very active person, they would continue to read it. And then some people who were inactive would not read that healthcare message, but then they found a group of people who were kind of in the middle. So they weren't completely inactive and they were somewhat active, not as much as they should have been. And when they came across the healthcare message, they would use that as motivation, as to say, to, get active and different things like that. And then information requests were available. Threatening information was preferred over reassuring information. So the study just also showed that when people get a healthcare message, they would prefer to have a healthcare message that tells them all of the bad things that can go wrong, to try to push them to change that behavior, to make that change, rather than have a article that reassures them like, you will be okay, you can overcome this. So they would prefer the threatening information to come across their screen. And now that I have told you about some of the tests that were done in selective exposure to healthcare messages, I will now tell you about a study that was done. Okay, so each person was given a set of instructions before they did the actual study. They did a practice study. Each section consisted of questions, and they were given anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes to complete each question. Before they were given the questions regarding the healthcare messages, they were given messages that were called distractors. And what distractors are, they would give you seemingly message that seem to be healthcare related, such as artificial sweeteners and things like that. But instead, they have 4 categories for you to choose from for the actual study. Okay, so selective exposure task was 8 minutes, and then the post questions were 12 minutes. A total of 419 participants agreed to the study from a university out in Midwest United States. 53% female, 59.5% white, 12.6% black, 12.4% Asian, 1.7% Hispanic, and 3.8% other. And of all of those 419 people, 92% of those people said that they are internet users, and 93% of that 419 total said that they visit internet sites 3+ times a day, or they spend more than 3 hours a day online. When they conducted the study, it was done in a private lab. Each participant had their own cubicle. That way, you weren't looking onto anybody else's answers, or you weren't persuaded by what anybody else thought or what anybody else had to say. Okay, so now that we have talked about some of the tests, I will now tell you about some of the results. And as a result to the study, they have found out that individuals who engage in healthcare behaviors spent more time reading the messages to promote that behavior. So as I said before, if you are a person who eats healthy, you eat very organic food, and you came across a healthcare message talking about organic food, you're more likely to sit and read that healthcare message as opposed to somebody who eats more fast food instead of, the healthier choice in foods. And then not only that, the individuals who fell short of perceived standards in health behaviors, the more they allotted the content promoting that behavior. So the other thing that they found are some people who were not as active in those behaviors as far as like being physically fit or eating organic foods and such. The articles that they came across online actually motivated them to do a little bit better. Okay, so in the discussion, they just discussed how cognitive dissonance ties into the study of how people take their pre-existing behaviors, and that kind of determines what they read and what they didn't read. So today I have talked to you about cognitive dissonance and how it tied into the theory. I also talked to you about some of the studies that were done, and then I also gave you some of the results. And the next time you come across a healthcare message, just kind of think about how it affects you, or if you have a pre-existing behavior that goes against that healthcare message that was presented to you.